Good morning from SFG Top Performance. We have our regulars with us today. We have Charles, Jason, and Derrick. We have a lot of wonderful topics to cover, from replanting, concerns of ours today, field forecasting, post applications on seed, our spraying, our value-added products, our equipment, how it's being set up. And we're going to start off with Derrick talking about replant corn.
Yes. So this week, the big topic, or what we've been working on, mostly down in our southern region, has been replant on corn and soybeans. Not the most fun part of the job, but it's all part of it. So wanted to go over kind of what we look at and kind of what you should be looking at in your fields if you're in these areas that might need replanted or things are starting to look a little tough. That 3-week window of rain really put a hurt on some of the later planted crop. The middle of May, that sort of time frame. If you planted it early, it seemed to got out of the ground and put some roots under it and was able to handle it. But it was when you planted it and then it rained for that 3 weeks where that seed just sat in that wet soil, where we've seen a lot of damping off. We've seen a lot of pythium in corn. Seen a lot of issues out there. So when we go out and look at these fields, and we're looking at a corn field for a replant decision right now, we're doing stand evaluations and figuring out, is there enough yield potential out there to just leave the field as it is, or do we need to tear it up and replant? So how we make those decisions right now is first week of June, even with a replant decision, we are at 70% yield potential. It's kind of a rule of thumb, and we go off Iowa State and industry recommendations for those. So right now we're talking 70%. And if a field down in southern region is max yield 180 bushel, 70%, we're at 125, 130 bushel corn already. So that makes it almost a little bit discouraging when we're talking about a replant, and you really want to make sure that's the right thing to do. So when we're out evaluating these fields and taking these stand counts, the yield percentage for 15,000 plant population to 20,000 plant population is still in the 85 to 90% range. So kind of what we have been saying is that if you have a decently even 20,000 final plant population right now, we're recommending to leave it there. And I know that sounds really low, and that's not where we want to be, but just to tear everything up and have corn start over right now, it really starts to tail off. And then you run into, well, do you run a field cultivator or do you have to kill the corn? And if you use corn killer products, you usually have a plant back of about a week. So then you're already another week behind. So it's one of the tougher decisions to make, but we're out there. I have to go look at one today. So we're out there helping customers. So if you have any of these issues, sure feel free to reach out to us on the corn side. On the soybean, it's been kind of all or nothing. There hasn't been any fields that we've seen that, your stands, all kind of their stuff still coming. It's either really good or really bad. So we've only had a handful of replant soybeans where it's pretty much, one soybean in a 10-foot area has come up. So those decisions have been easier because it's usually been a disaster. Says, yeah, you're just going to have to replant. Yield potential right now for soybeans, we're still okay. We can still get good soybean yields by planting this week. So I'm not as worried about those. With plant population with soybeans, as long as we have an even 70,000 plant population right now, we're recommending to leave it. Those beans will branch out and will be okay, and we'll still have a decent amount of yield potential. Other things going on in my world this week is we've started the side dress and top dress urea and UAN. So we're doing nitrogen applications, and we're working with our field forecasting tool to help make those nitrogen recommendations. Corn is generally at about getting close to the V5 stage. A lot of it's V4, some V3, some of the later planted stuff. So tissue sampling is going to be the big push. We're going to get that started next week. So then we'll really be able to evaluate what's going on in those fields right now. We're going to see how much nitrogen we lost with that rain, and we're going to see if we're short on NPK, and the micronutrients. We use our field forecasting tool for these nitrogen recommendations and our in-season yield predictions. And these tissue samples are going to help us calibrate those, and we'll have a good idea what's going on in the field here after we get those taken next week. So any fields that you have questions about, a tissue sample is really the best way in season that we can have the best effect to figure out what's going on in those fields. Jason, what else is starting in corn and soybeans, or we started on the post applications?
Yeah, I've been kicking around in a lot of corn and soybean fields this week to, see what we have for weed pressure. And if a field's been taken care of well, especially the corn fields, and has a good pre-on, they're fairly clean. If they haven't and there's nothing done, they're a weedy mess. So it's time to get our post done. That corn is B4, B5, and it's growing rapidly with this heat we've had this week. It's unbelievable how much it's grown, and it's hit that nitrogen, and it's really exploding, and it's coming full of plants and looks really good. In the Milo Pleasantville area, our corn looks tremendous, unlike in our southern region that you've been in, Derrick. I do see, a lot of the corn, there's a lot of small water hemp and velvet leaf and some foxtail that's starting to emerge. So it's time to get them post applications done there. And they're definitely time. This corn's going to be canopied here. Give it a couple of weeks and we won't know it's the same cornfield. It's hitting that nitrogen and it's really growing fast. It really looks good. And soybeans, if a good pre was put down with multiple modes of action like we've been promoting, they look tremendous. There's a few small weeds. Some have been 30 to 45 days where it's time to, anytime it's going to be time to post them, but there's very few weeds in them fields. If the fields have been maintained and we've put that multiple mode of action pre down, they really look good. So I think we're going to have, it's going to be a week or two. It'll be time to be hitting them. But the fields that didn't have a good pre down or nothing down are the same thing. They're needing attention really fast. And there's a lot of weeds in there, a lot of weed pressure in them soybeans. Most of them are emerged and they're pretty good size. Most of them in that B1 stage where they look really good and they look healthy and they're ready to grow, but they haven't because of the cool weather we had before. So it's about time to post them. We have a lot of good options with soybeans. I don't have any producers in this area that are using straight Roundup. It's all, E3 beans, which we have a lot of good options. We have Liberty and we have Enlist, and there's a lot of them this year. And there are a few dicamba fields, which dicamba works well as also, but there's more of the E3, which we have, that Enlist is going to give us an option besides Liberty. So right now I'd like to have a word from our sponsor.
Enlist E3 soybeans and Enlist herbicides offer many benefits to growers. Exceptional weed control, ease of use, and on-target application are a few of the reasons to choose the Enlist weed control system. The 2,4-D choline in Enlist 1 and Enlist Duo provides exceptional control of tough and resistant broadleaf weeds. But you also have additional flexible options with E3 soybeans. There are 3 tolerances to 2,4-D choline, glyphosate, and glufosinate, meaning you can design a custom approach for post-emergent weed control on E3 acres. Lastly, you get the benefits of on-target application with 2,4-D choline and Colex D technology found in Enlist 1 and Enlist Duo. We have near zero volatility, reduced potential for physical drift, and better handling characteristics. Enlist E3 soybeans are the emerging leader in herbicide trait technology. Learn more at enlist.com.
While we're doing this post application, we talked last week about, we had Kevin Stewart talking about a lot of the good value added products to add into these fields. And boy, there's a lot of potential there. And, with the markets we have, a lot of these will pay for themselves with just a bushel of products. So there's a lot of things we can do. The corn, that SRN SRN 25B is going to be a great option. And if you don't put it in your herbicide pass, look at your fungicide and adding it to your fungicide pass later. But I think that's definitely going to pay for itself rather quickly. The simple release in corn and soybeans is going to give you a good micro package. So there's a lot of them products that we definitely will add our top end yield with that we need to be looking at. And Kevin did a very good job last week and his presentation of describing a few of them. So if you want to look back at that and as a reminder of what they are, I won't go over all of them again, but there's a lot of good products we could be using that will definitely pay us this year. So there's a lot of things we need to be looking at and doing inside dress nitrogen, it's going to help a lot with this yellower corn that is starting to green up, but I think there's a huge benefit with that as well. So while we're doing this side dress application, Charles, I understand they've been calibrating a lot of equipment. Can you talk about that?
Yes, sir. Anywhere from the liquid machines that are knifing in the ground, those will do anywhere from 12 rows at a time or 16 rows. So we weighed it, as in you put the product in the tank, go do a certain field, come back and weigh it so you know exactly what you did, not just, by the side tube you did this much, but done several calibration jobs on the liquid machines. They're pretty much dialed in. They're starting to wind down for the acres we had to do. They're over half to 2/3 of the way done. The dry machine, that's been more extensive calibration. You got to go out and do an actual pan test, side dressing urea versus putting on just regular fertilizer on a crop field. It's a different spinner. You got to adjust the spinners back there, the spread on it. Urea don't throw as good as P&K, but a lot of extensive testing. Brother Jason's the one that's really good at getting it dialed in, and took a couple of guys, went out there and did it 3 or 4 times. And the biggest thing that'll affect it's wind. So this last week, we've had a really good non-wind event this week. It's kind of nice that the weather's finally calmed down and they're getting along really well on that. Other spraying wise, they're, like I said, spraying post beans or post corn, a little bit of post beans, the beans that didn't have any pre on, but for the most part, everything's going really good, and keep this dry weather going so we can get ahead of it.
Charles, you talked about the dry machines. What about calibrating the liquid machines? Is that a process, or how does that work for us?
On calibrating them, we will check those several times throughout the year. In the beginning of the spring, we'll check those as in gallons per acre, making sure you're putting on the right gallons by your flow meter. Also, like when we have to clean out from going from one product to another, that's another perfect time to go back out and check your nozzles. You got a handheld tester you can put on some of those if you think a nozzle's not spraying correctly. They're getting worn. For the most part, you can tell by walking by it as you're checking it and cleaning it out. But those nozzles we got 2 different sets of nozzles we got to run. You got to run your 4s and your 5s, which is higher volume for this Liberty. It takes 20 gallon an acre. I also got a 3rd set, I guess, for the dicamba. Maybe we'll get lucky and not have as many of those acres this year, but it's many times checking. It's not just to start out at the beginning of the season and say, yep, it'll be all right. It's good. But no, we continue to check it, make sure it's doing it correctly.
Derrick, can you give us a little bit of information on the response to fungicide scores on our crops, on the corns?
Yes, we sure can. So what the response to fungicide scores are is our distributors actually test their corn hybrid products and give it scores based on how it responds to fungicide. Now, what these are, they take out the variables of, it has the genetics for good, disease tolerance, and that sort of thing. They throw all that out and they put fungicide on corn, and they only look at yield and then they categorize it. Because sometimes we don't get diseases out there throughout the year, but we still get really good benefits from the fungicide application just for plant health aspects, and just some hybrids like fungicide more than others. So if you're spraying a fungicide on a hybrid that, just doesn't seem to respond to it, I mean, there's times that you're throwing the money away. There's better places to put that money. So we know what these hybrids are, and we obviously can't test every single one, but we test the 5 big name brands in our decal and cropland corn. We know all the hybrids that we are running right now. We know what the response to fungicide score is, and we kind of like to pair these fields that we're pushing a little bit, the ones that we're putting side dress nitrogen on, the ones that we're putting the value added product, putting the symbols on. These fields are generally a candidate for fungicide because they we're going after more yield. So you want to know what hybrid you have, so then you know if it has a low, medium, or high response to fungicide. They test hybrids every year. Last year, the range for the low range was about 6 to 12 bushels was the low range. Then you get 12 to 18 is the medium, and then usually 18 to 20 plus is the high range for these fungicide applications. So even with crop markets as they are now, the low range generally is paying. It's not like it is every year, but how we make fungicide recommendations is we look at these scores and we lean towards spraying them, especially if they are in the medium to high range. I mean, we obviously want to be out in the fields looking at diseases, because the disease doesn't care what the responsive fungicide score is. If you have northern corn leaf blight out there, we need to be going after it. But that's just a really good way. The responsive fungicide scores are a really good way to take the risk out of a fungicide application and really be able to find a good return on investment. And we have all that information, and we try to give that out to all of our customers. But even if you don't buy seed from us, we have the big names. We have the Pioneer, we have the Prevent, we have NK, DeKalb, and Cropland. So we have a lot of information for these, and we can find the best place to get those extra 10 to 12 bushels when we're talking about fungicide timing.
That's great. Great information again. As we work here at Smith Fertilizer and Grain, we continue to try to strive and do better and improve ourselves. And that comes with a strong foundation of principles and best practices that leads SFG towards repeated success. And that success is, the process will eventually become a good habit for each manager and employee. And outmoded thinking and bad habits fall away over time. With less energy wasted on trying to make things work, there's more energy available for making things work. Our team ensures everything is coordinated and done in the right order to minimize the need for time-consuming and costly concerns. We're here to help you make money. We're here to enjoy ourselves and have you enjoy yourselves. I want to thank you for listening to us today, for attending our podcast here. I hope that all is going well for you this spring. I want to thank you for the past business you've had, and I want to thank you for the future business you bring us.